Kai Ashford opened his eyes and saw a sky the color of dirty copper. His head was throbbing as if someone had hit him on the back of the head with a sack of rocks. He was lying face up on the wet ground and could smell rotten fish and something burnt. His mouth was parched. His fingers were trembling. He tried to stand up and realized his body wouldn't obey him. It wasn't his body. It was too light, too small, too weak. He looked at his hands and saw thin wrists with protruding bones, the hands of a 17-year-old boy who hadn't eaten his fill in a long time. Kai sat down and the world swayed before his eyes. The market. He was sitting in the middle of the market square in the city of Tenbrook. All around him, merchants were chattering and porters were lugging sacks. No one paid him any attention. A man is lying on the ground in the middle of the square and nobody cares. He clenched his fist and felt something in his palm. A coin. A single copper coin with the worn profile of some king. That's all he has. His whole life fits in his fist. Fragments of someone else's memory floated into his mind. His mother, a laundress. She died a week ago. A debt collector took her body because she owed 3 silver coins. There was no funeral. The neighbors had thrown his belongings out onto the street even before his mother stopped breathing. He remembered something else, too. Not someone else's, his own. Wet asphalt. The screech of brakes. A little girl at the crosswalk. His own body between her and the bumper. The impact. Darkness. And here he was. Kai Ashford, 17 years old, an orphan from the slums. 1 coin in his pocket and 0 reasons to go on living. He stood up. His legs buckled, but he stayed on his feet. He looked around, and then he saw the cage. It stood at the end of the market row between barrels of salted fish and a cart of coal. An iron cage the size of a doghouse. A girl sat inside. Dirty bandages on her arms and shoulders. Tangled black hair covered her face. 2 short, obsidian-colored horns jutted out from beneath her hair. A demoness. Kai didn't know where he'd heard that word before, but he knew it. Someone else's memory was telling him. Demons, heretics, enemies of the human race. Anyone who touched a demon could be accused of heresy and sent to the stake. The crowd gave the cage a wide berth, only the flies weren't afraid. Next to the cage, a fat man in a greasy leather apron sat on a stool, gnawing on an apple. A slave trader. A bronze guild broker's badge hung around his neck. Kai stood and stared at the cage. The girl didn't move. He could see her back rising and falling. She's breathing. She's still breathing. Something inside him tightened. Not in his head, in his chest. He knew this moment, knew it by heart. 3 years of working in shelters had taught him to recognize a body that had stopped fighting. She wasn't asleep. She was waiting, waiting for it all to end. Kai looked at the coin in his hand, a single copper coin. Not enough for a funeral, not enough for food, not enough for a place to sleep. He walked over to the slave trader. The man raised his cloudy eyes to him and smirked. Kai placed the coin on the counter. The slave trader stared at the copper coin as if it were a dead cockroach. Then he looked at Kai, then back at the coin. He laughed, loud and wet. He splattered Kai with bits of apple. He said, "You couldn't even buy a spit in the face for that coin." Kai didn't move. He didn't take his hand away. He stood there and waited. The slave trader stopped laughing. Something flashed in his eyes. Not respect. Calculation. He looked at the cage, then back at Kai. He scooped up the coin with his greasy fingers. He said, "Take her." He said she'd be dead by morning and he didn't need another corpse on his hands. Cheaper to give her away than to bury her. He turned the key in the lock. The cage door creaked open. The girl didn't move. Kai crouched down in front of the cage. Inside, it reeked of blood and iron. He saw her eyes, violet, glowing even through the dirt and tangled hair, the eyes of a person who was no longer considered human. He reached out his hand. She flinched back. She pressed herself against the bars. Her horns scraped against the iron. Around her neck gleamed a dull metal collar with 3 indented symbols. Kai didn't pull his hand away. He said his name was Kai. Just Kai. She looked at him for a long time, an eternity. Then her lips moved. She whispered 3 words. "You can see me." Not a question, a statement, a test. Kai nodded. She closed her eyes. 2 streaks ran down her dirty cheeks from beneath her eyelashes. She reached out her hand. Her fingers touched his palm. Cold, weightless. And the world cracked. Not a metaphor. A light flashed before Kai's eyes. A golden panel unfurled in the air like a scroll that no one had unrolled in 300 years. Lines of text raced from top to bottom in a language he didn't know but understood. The tablet of deeds activated. The keeper found. Connection established. Moral currency launched. Balance, 0 MC. The forbidden catalog is accessible. Access level, F. Current action being evaluated. Purchase of a living being to save a life in the complete absence of resources. Value of the action confirmed. Motivation pure. Plus 80 MC credited. The panel flashed and retracted. Kai blinked. The girl was still holding his hand. The slave trader was picking his teeth and saw nothing. No one around them saw anything. Only he did. She let go of his hand and tried to stand up. Her legs wouldn't hold her. Kai caught her by the elbow. She weighed as much as a sack of feathers. He led her away from the cage, away from the market, away from the smell of fish and the indifference of strangers. They walked 2 blocks, 3. The streets narrowed. The houses leaned toward one another like drunks. The Tenbrook slums began at the 3rd turn from the market and went on forever. Kai found an empty passage between 2 boarded-up houses. He sat her down on a stone step. He took off his shirt, his only one, and draped it over her shoulders. She looked up at him. Her violet eyes were bottomless. She said her name was Lariah. She paused. She added that he was the first person to ask her name in 40 years. Kai sat down beside her. He leaned his back against the wall. He closed his eyes. A golden panel spun in his mind. 80 MK, catalog, level F, keeper. He didn't understand a thing, absolutely nothing. But one thing he understood for sure. The girl next to him was breathing, and that was the only thing that mattered right now. Lariah was silent for a minute. Then she spoke, quietly, almost without a voice. She said he'd made a mistake, that they were looking for her, that the collar around her neck was getting weaker every day, and when it snapped, everyone who was looking for her would find her. She said she wasn't an ordinary demoness. She was the guardian of the dark market, the last of her kind, the very system that the Church of Light had declared heresy 300 years ago, the very system for the destruction of which they had carried out the 3rd purge and slaughtered her entire people. That system was now bound to him. Kai opened his eyes. He looked at her. He said he had questions, lots of questions. But first he asked when she had last eaten. Lariah fell silent. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her lower lip trembled. She turned away. She said she didn't remember. Kai stood up. He looked at the empty alley, at the boarded-up doors, at his skinny, shirtless body. 0 coins, 0 food, 0 roof over his head. A demoness they're hunting, a system considered heresy. 14 days until the Inquisitor's inspection, and not a single ally within 1,000 miles. He inhaled, exhaled, said aloud that things had been worse. Lariah looked at him as if he were crazy. He shrugged, held out his hand to her. She took it. They went to look for water. They found water in a well behind an old smithy on the edge of the slums. Kai pulled up a bucket. It was murky. It smelled of rust, but it was drinkable. Lariah drank long and thirstily. Water ran down her chin and dripped onto his shirt, which hung on her like a sack. Kai waited. He didn't rush her. When she pulled away from the bucket, he filled it again. She drank half of the second bucket and finally stopped. She looked at him. She said he was strange. Kai replied that he'd heard that before. They settled into an abandoned basement of a former dye house. The door hung by a single hinge. The roof leaked in 3 places. The floor was dirt. But the walls stood firm and the entrance wasn't visible from the street. Lariah sat in a corner and pulled her knees up to her chest. Her horns pressed against the wall. She began to explain. The dark market. 300 years ago, it was an open system accessible to every resident of Ardaven. Not a store, not a guild. The law of the world. The first god created it as a mechanism of balance. Every action carried weight. Any weight could be exchanged for an ability. Not for gold, for a deed. A peasant saved a child from the river and received the power to reinforce the riverbanks. A blacksmith fed the homeless for 10 years, and his hammer gained the power to split rock. A mother who carried her sick son across 3 mountain passes received the gift of healing. Everything was fair. Everything was transparent. Everything was recorded in the tablets. Then came the Guild of Skills, followed by the Church of Light. They saw that the system was depriving them of control. If any peasant can become strong through their deeds, then what need is there for lords and priests? They declared the black market to be a demonic heresy. They rewrote history. The guardians, who had been the link between the system and the people, were declared demons. The purges began. The first, the second, the third. By the end of the third purge, fewer than 20 souls remained of the people of Lariah. The market was shut down. Skills began to be sold for gold through the guild. Seals were implanted into the blood for money. The rich are strong, the poor are dead. Lariah fell silent. Kai was processing it all. The golden panel flashed before his eyes again. He focused on it. He mentally scrolled through it. The Catalogue of the Forbidden. A long list of skills. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Each with 2 prices. The first in gold. Unfathomable numbers. 3,000 gold pieces. 8,000. 12,000. The second price was different. A condition. An action. Next to each skill was a brief description of what one had to do to obtain it. Blade of Reflected Pain. 3,000 gold pieces, or spare the one who tried to kill you while looking him in the eyes. Aura of the Incorruptible. 12,000 gold pieces, or refuse a bribe knowing that you'll be killed for doing so. The Shield of the Last Word. 5,000 gold pieces, or speak the truth before those who are ready to kill for it. Kai flipped through the catalog. Every skill from rank F to rank S. Every one was available, but not for money, which he didn't have, but for deeds, for decisions, for a price that can't be measured in coins. He minimized the panel, looked at Lariah, asked about the restrictions. She raised her eyebrows, said there was only one restriction, and it was absolute. If he did a good deed for the sake of a reward, the reward wouldn't come. The counter would go into the red. The system reads intent, not words, not actions. Intent, the heart, not the hands. Kai nodded. He understood that. In his past life, he'd worked for 3 years for half his salary, not because anyone was keeping score, but because the children at the orphanage looked at him and smiled. He asked about the resonance scale. Lariah explained. Every person he helped formed an invisible bond with him from 0 to 100. At 20, they sense when he's unwell. At 50, they can strengthen his ability with their will. At 100, they become witnesses. Their faith turns into physical strength. Kai asked what her resonance with him was right now. Lariah looked away. She said, 15. Kai didn't ask if that was a lot or a little. From the sound of her voice, he knew it was a lot. For her. For a being who hadn't trusted anyone for 200 years, 15 was a huge number. They sat in the basement until dark. Lariah talked. Kai listened. He absorbed every word. He memorized it all. The collar around her neck was a seal of suppression. It blocked her demonic nature and made her almost indistinguishable from a human. Almost. It didn't hide her horns, but the collar was weakening. It was designed to last a few months. Less than 3 weeks remained. When it snapped, her power would burst forth, and every inquisitor within a 100-mile radius will sense it. Kai ran the numbers. 14 days until the inspection, less than 21 before the collar breaks. He remembered the notice he'd seen on the wall near the market when he'd led Lariah there. The seal of purity, mandatory for all residents. A priest places a hand on the chest and scans for unregistered abilities. Kai now has the system. Lariah has demonic blood. Both are bound for the stake. He rubbed his face with his hands. 14 days, 0 coins, 0 food. A demoness with a creaking collar, and a system that only works if he doesn't think about personal gain. In the morning, he woke up from the cold. Lariah was sleeping in the corner, curled up like a cat. His shirt had ridden up, and he saw the scars on her back. Old ones. Many. So many. He looked away. He got up quietly. He went outside. The Ten Brook slums were waking up slowly. It smelled of smoke and stale bread. Somewhere, a cart creaked. Kai headed toward the market. He needed food. He needed information. He needed a plan. He walked through the narrow streets and looked around. He saw beggars on every corner, children with empty eyes, women with sores on their hands. The printing plague, a side effect of cheap guild seals. Peasants sold everything they had for strength. They received a defective seal in exchange for a bronze coin. The seal rotted in their blood. Their bodies became covered in sores. Death within half a year. His mother died from it. She caught the infection from the Lord's sheets she was washing. She didn't even buy a seal. She just washed the laundry of whoever had bought one. Kai reached the market. He stood off to the side. He watched. He counted. 7 food vendors, 2 butchers, a baker, 3 fish stalls, 1 warehouse behind the market, fenced off with a fence bearing a coat of arms. Baron Vorn's coat of arms. Kai noticed rats by the fence. Lots of rats. The smell coming from behind the fence was sweetish and heavy. Rotting grain. Someone is hoarding grain and not selling it, waiting for the price to go up, while people all around are dying of hunger. He stood there, staring at that fence, and he thought, not about the system, not about points, about the 10 children he'd seen along the way, about their empty eyes, about their thin arms, about how the slums smell not only of poverty, but also of death. He returned to the basement. Lariah was awake. She sat upright, waiting. She thought he'd left, that he'd given up, like everyone before him. Kai could tell by the look on her hands. She was clutching the fabric of her shirt so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. He sat down across from her. He said he had a plan. She needed to tell him everything she knew about Ten Brook's city laws. Every law, every decree, every loophole. Lariah looked at him. She said she'd lived in this world for 200 years. She knew the laws better than those who'd written them. Kai smiled. For the first time in 2 days. Kai and Lariah set up camp in the abandoned basement of a dye house. Lariah explained how the moral currency system worked and told the story of the black market, which had been destroyed by the church and the guild 300 years ago. Kai discovered a warehouse full of rotting grain behind Baron Vorn's coat of arms and began planning how to obtain food for the slums using the city's laws. By the 3rd day, Kai knew the laws of Ten Brook by heart. Lariah dictated them. He memorized them. His mind was working like it had never worked in his former body. Maybe it was his young brain. Maybe it was the system. Maybe it was the hunger that was sharpening everything. The decree on spoiled food, enacted 70 years ago under King Eldwin II. If food stored within the city limits is deemed spoiled, any citizen has the right to demand that it be transferred to the community. The fine for storing spoiled goods for the purpose of speculation, 20 silver coins. A forgotten decree, buried under 3 dozen later laws, but not repealed. Never repealed by anyone. Kai left the basement in the morning and headed for the market. He left Lariah behind. The horns. Too conspicuous. She didn't argue. She just told him to be careful. Kai nodded. On the way, he passed an alley where 3 children were rummaging through the trash behind a tavern. The oldest looked about 10, the youngest 5 or 6. They were pulling potato peels out of the mud and eating them right there. Kai stopped. He watched. Then he walked on. Not because he didn't care, because in an hour he was going to feed not just the 3 of them, but everyone. At the market, he found Garin Mort. The slave trader was sitting in the same spot. Same stool, same apple. Only the cage was empty. Kai approached. Garin recognized him and grimaced. He said the Demoness was probably already dead. Kai didn't respond to that. He asked Garin if he knew that grain was stored in the warehouse behind the market. Garin narrowed his eyes. The warehouse belonged to Baron Vorn. Everyone in Tenbrook knew that. No one went near it. Kai said the grain was rotting. Garin shrugged. He said it wasn't his grain and it was none of his business. Kai turned toward the market. He raised his voice. He didn't shout. He spoke calmly and clearly. He addressed the merchants, the shoppers, anyone who could hear him. He said that grain was rotting in Baron Vorn's warehouse. He said that by decree of King Eldwin II from such and such a year, any citizen has the right to demand that spoiled food be handed over to the community. He said that the fine for price gouging is 20 silver coins. The market fell silent. People stared at him. A skinny, shirtless boy quoting royal decrees. Someone snorted. Someone tapped a finger against their temple. But several women stepped closer. One asked if such a decree really existed. Kai repeated it. The number, the year, the wording, word for word. The woman exchanged a glance with another. The other nodded. She remembered. Her grandmother had told her about it. There had been such a law. Kai headed for the warehouse. 5 people followed him. Then 10. Then 20. A guard stood at the gate. Just one. Sleepy. The sword at his belt was more for show. Kai stopped in front of him. He said he had come to demand, in accordance with Eldwin II's decree, the handover of the spoiled food. The guard blinked. He didn't understand. Kai repeated himself, slowly. The guard said he wouldn't let him in without the owner. Kai said a notice would be sent to the owner, but the decree didn't require his presence. The decree required the presence of 3 witnesses and 1 community representative. He turned around. 30 people were standing behind him. He asked if there were 3 among them who could confirm the smell of spoilage. 6 hands went up at once. The guard took a step back. He wasn't prepared for this. He'd been hired to chase away beggars, not to argue with the law. He opened the gate. Inside, it was worse than Kai had thought. 50 sacks of grain. Half of them had been torn open. The grain was covered in gray-green mold. Mice. Rats. The smell was so foul that the woman standing next to him pinched her nose and recoiled. The grain had been rotting there for at least 2 months. It could have been distributed while it was still good. Now only part of it was usable. But some was better than nothing. Kai gave the order. Sort out the undamaged sacks. Take them out. Hand them out. He spoke as if he had the right to do so. People obeyed. Not because he was strong or important, because he was the only one speaking. 12 sacks were saved. The grain was distributed in the square. No pushing, no shouting. Kai stood nearby and made sure everyone got an equal share. The children he'd seen that morning in the alley were the first to arrive. The oldest boy, about 10 years old, looked up at him. He didn't say a word. He simply took the little sack of grain with both hands and pressed it to his chest. The golden panel flashed, plus 200 MK. Condition fulfilled. Provide sustenance to those in need using the law rather than force. Skill unlocked. Aura of satiation. F rank. Food prepared in the presence of the bearer is twice as filling. Plus 40 resonance with 10 aid recipients. Total group resonance 40. Kai closed the panel. The 10-year-old boy was still standing in front of him. A girl stood next to him. About 14 or 15 years old, short, uneven hair, a dirty face, piercing eyes. She wasn't looking at Kai with gratitude, with suspicion. Kai recognized that look, too. He'd seen it 100 times in orphanages. The look of a child who had learned that nothing comes for free. She told the boy, "Let's go." She turned away, and that's when Kai noticed. His pocket felt lighter. He reached in. Empty. There was nothing in his pocket. Absolutely nothing. He looked at the girl. She was walking away without looking back, clutching something in her fist. She'd picked the pockets of a man who had nothing, and found in them something that wasn't there. Kai snorted. The panel flashed again. Resonance scale with the target Mira Sawyer, value 5. Kai didn't know who Mira Sawyer was, but the system did. He returned to the basement as the sun began to set. Lariah was sitting in exactly the same spot, but something had changed. A bowl stood on the floor next to her. Clay. Rough. Something was steaming inside it. Lariah wasn't looking at him. She was staring at the wall. She said the neighbor upstairs had left it by the door. The old woman from the house across the street. She must have heard that someone was living in the basement. Millet porridge. Warm. Kai sat down. He took the bowl, divided it in half, placed one half in front of Lariah. She said she wasn't hungry. Kai said they both knew that wasn't true. She looked at him. A long second. She took her half. They ate in silence. The porridge was bland and watery. The best meal of his life. Of both his lives. After the porridge, he told her about the warehouse. About the decree. About the grain. About the people who'd come for him at the gates. Lariah listened. When he finished, she said one word. Garen. Kai nodded. Garen Mort. The slave trader had seen everything. He'd heard the decree. He'd seen his patron's warehouse raided in front of witnesses. He'd report it to Baron Vorn. Tonight. Tomorrow morning, the Baron would know that some beggar boy had distributed his grain under a law the Baron had never even seen. Kai said he knew. Lariah asked if he was ready for what was to come. Kai said that in his past life they'd tried to fire him 14 times. Lariah didn't understand what fire meant. Kai said it was when they tell you you're no longer needed. She understood. Quietly. Deeply, she understood. That evening, there was a rustling at the entrance to the basement. Kai tensed. Lariah crept closer. The door creaked. Standing in the doorway was that same girl from the market, Mira Sawyer. Behind her stood children. 5, 10, she counted them. 22 children. Mira looked at Kai. She looked at Lariah, at the horns. She didn't flinch. She said one sentence. "Feed them, you fool!" She turned and walked away. The children remained. 22 children stood in the basement doorway, staring at the skinny, shirtless guy and the Demoness with horns. Kai looked at Lariah. Lariah looked at Kai. The panel flashed. Plus 25 resonance with Mira Sawyer. Current value 30. Kai sighed. He said he needed more grain. Baron Eiselvorn arrived on the 4th day. Not in the morning. Closer to noon. The Baron didn't get up early. Barons don't get up early for beggars. His carriage rolled into the market square, escorted by 6 mounted guards in black leather armor bearing the Vorn family crest on their chests. A silver gauntlet clenching a red drop. The Bloody Grip. That was also the name of the seal he had purchased. 4,000 gold pieces for the ability to squeeze the blood from an opponent's veins with a single act of will. The Baron could kill a man without rising from his chair. And he did kill. Often. The carriage came to a stop. The door opened. Vorn stepped out. Tall, hefty, a red face, small eyes sunk into chubby cheeks, dressed in silk the color of fresh blood, a ring on every finger. He stood in the square, looking around with the expression of a man whose foot had been stepped on, and now someone was going to pay for it. Garen Mort shuffled beside him. Short, sweaty. He pointed at the ransacked warehouse, at the empty sacks, at the gate that no one had closed. The Baron listened and flushed crimson. Kai stood by the well, 30 paces from the square. He watched. He waited. He knew the Baron would arrive. He'd been preparing for 2 days, not for battle, for a conversation. The Baron turned to the crowd. The market fell silent. Everyone was watching. He spoke. His voice was loud, accustomed to giving orders. He asked who dared to touch his property. Who was this thief? Who was this rebel? Silence. No one wanted to answer. No one wanted to look him in the eye. Kai stepped out toward the well. He stood in plain sight. He said it was him. The Baron looked at him, from head to toe, for a long time. Then he smirked. He said it was a joke, a skinny little boy, skin and bones, no seal, no coat of arms, no name. Kai said he did have a name, Kai Ashford, son of a laundress, an orphan, and he was acting in accordance with Eldwin II's decree regarding spoiled food. The Baron blinked. He didn't know of that decree. His advisor didn't know of that decree. His guards couldn't read. Garen hissed from the side that the boy was making it up. Kai repeated it, year, number, paragraph, wording, word for word. Someone in the square gasped. The woman who had confirmed the spoilage yesterday. She stood in the crowd and nodded. The Baron flushed even redder. His hand twitched. Kai felt something tighten inside him. Pressure in his temples, a jolt in his chest. Blood grip. The Baron was trying to squeeze the blood out of him right here, in the square, in front of witnesses. Kai staggered. His knee buckled. Pain shot through his entire body like a wave of boiling water. But he held his ground. Not because he was strong, because he couldn't fall. Not now. Not in front of these people. The panel flashed at the edge of his vision. The witness's gaze skill is active. Kai looked the Baron in the eyes, straight on, without blinking. The Baron flinched. His hand dropped. The pressure in Kai's chest eased. 10 seconds. Just 10 seconds of lost willpower. But that was enough. Kai straightened up and spoke. Not about the law, not about the decree. He began to name names. Rilla Thorne, 27 years old, a seamstress. She died of the print plague 18 months ago. Her husband worked in the Baron's coal mines. When she fell ill, her husband asked for a day off to take her to a doctor. He was denied. She died in the barracks while he was hauling coal. A boy named Derek's son, 12 years old, a fisherman's son. His father was taken away for debts owed to the barony. The boy tried to fish on his own. He drowned. His body was found a week later. An old woman named Farah, 60 years old, a weaver. She had paid her taxes for 40 years. When she went blind and could no longer weave, the Baron ordered her evicted from her home. She died on the street in winter. Kai spoke, name after name, face after face, story after story. Lariah told him she had lived in this city, in a cage, for 3 months. She listened. She remembered. Every scream, every cry, every name whispered by those who passed by her cage, thinking she couldn't hear them. She heard everything, and she passed it on to him. Kai named 16 names. The square fell silent. The Baron's face turned red, then white, then red again. His guards exchanged glances. They knew those names. Some of them, at least. They lived in this city. These were their neighbors, their relatives. A woman in the crowd raised her head. That very woman, Derek's son's mother. She stepped forward, silently. She looked the Baron in the face, and spat. Silence. The spit hung on his silk collar. The Baron didn't move. A second woman stepped forward. She spat. A third. A man. Another. 5 people stood before the Baron and looked him in the eye. The Baron turned away. He got into the carriage, slammed the door shut. The carriage drove off, quickly. The guards trotted after it. Garen stayed behind. He stood in the middle of the square with his mouth agape. Then he ran after the carriage. The square exhaled. Someone laughed. Nervously. Someone cried. The panel flashed. Plus 300 MK. Condition fulfilled. To call the forgotten by name before the one who forgot them. Skill unlocked. Choir of names. D rank. When the names of those who have suffered injustice are spoken, everyone present hears each name as if it were spoken directly to them. The effect lasts 1 minute. During this minute, lying is impossible within a radius of 20 steps. Kai leaned against the well. His hands were shaking. His legs were shaking. His whole body was shaking. The bloody grip had nearly killed him. He knew that. If the witness's gaze hadn't kicked in at that very second, if the Baron hadn't hesitated for those 10 seconds, his blood would have boiled in his veins. He would have died in the square, and no one would have remembered his name. He returned to the basement. Lariah was standing by the door. She was waiting. When he entered, she looked at him for a long time. Then she turned away and walked to the corner. A minute later, she returned. She was holding a mug. Clay, rough, something dark and hot inside. Tea. She'd made him tea. Kai didn't know where she'd gotten the tea leaves. He didn't ask. He took the mug. The tea was cold, not hot, cold. Lariah must have brewed it a long time ago, while she was waiting, while she didn't know if he would return or not. Kai looked at her. Her hands were trembling. She looked away. 200 years. She hadn't made tea for anyone in 200 years. He raised the mug to his lips and drank it all, slowly. He didn't grimace. He said it was delicious. Lariah turned away, quickly, but he managed to see it. The corners of her lips twitched, upward. The panel flashed silently. Resonance with Lariah Vern Cassidier. Current value, 20. A knock on the door. Loud. Sharp. Kai set the mug down. Lariah instantly tensed. Claws extended from beneath her fingernails. Violet eyes glowed in the darkness of the basement. Kai walked to the door. He opened it. A woman stood on the threshold. Tall, broad-shouldered, short light hair. A scar across her left eyebrow. Chainmail under a travel cloak. A sword at her belt. Not for show. A working sword. She looked down at Kai, calmly, without malice, without interest, like a butcher looking at a carcass. She said she'd come on a contract. Someone had paid her to kill a poor boy from the slums who was sticking his nose where it didn't belong. She said she'd been paid 15 silver pieces. Good money for a simple job. She placed her hand on the hilt of her sword. Baron Vorn arrived in Tenbrook and tried to kill Kai with the bloody grip, but the witness's gaze stopped him for 10 seconds. Kai publicly read out the names of the Baron's 16 victims, and the crowd spat in Vorn's face. Kai received 300 MK and the D-rank skill Chorus of Names. Lariah made him tea for the first time, and her resonance rose to 20. At the end of the chapter, a mercenary appeared in the doorway with a contract to kill Kai. Kai stood in the doorway, watching the woman with the sword. Lariah, behind him, hissed softly, her claws at the ready. Kai raised his hand, not toward the woman, but toward Lariah. Back. Lariah didn't retract her claws, but stayed where she was. The woman watched this with mild interest. She said she was a demoness. Funny, so the rumors are true. Kai asked what rumors. She said that a kid from the slums had bought the horned creature for a copper coin and was now stirring up trouble at the market. Kai said creature was rude. Her name is Lariah. The woman raised an eyebrow. She said she didn't care what the demoness was called. She'd been paid for his head. But she was a professional and was giving him a minute for his last words. Kai looked at her chainmail, at her sword, at the scar across her eyebrow, at her hands, calloused, broad, hands that had held a sword for thousands of hours, but not the hands of a murderer, the hands of a soldier. He looked at her cloak. The fabric on her left shoulder was darker, as if a crest had once been sewn there. It had been torn off, recently. The threads were still sticking out. Kai asked which unit she was from. The woman flinched, a microscopic movement. Her finger tightened slightly around the hilt. She said it was none of his business. Kai said the emblem had been torn off, but the mark remained. A round patch, about the diameter of a fist. In the Mervale army, only company commanders wear such patches. The woman looked at him in silence. Kai continued. He said that in Mervale, company commanders hold a rank no lower than captain. A captain doesn't take contracts for 15 silver pieces. That price is beneath her dignity. So she's not in it for the money. So she has nowhere else to go. So she's been stripped of her rank. The woman took her hand off her sword, not because he'd convinced her, because he'd surprised her. She asked how he knew about the insignia. Kai didn't answer. He knew because Lariah had told him yesterday. Mervale's military structure, its hierarchy, its insignia. 200 years of observation from cell to cell. Lariah was a walking encyclopedia. Kai said her name. Audrey Valente, former captain of the 3rd Company of the 6th Infantry Regiment, stripped of her rank 8 months ago for refusing to carry out an order. The woman turned pale. Kai continued. An order issued by Baron Eiselvorn. An order to execute 32 peasants from the village of Olden for failing to pay the military tax. Audrey Valente refused. For that, she was stripped of her rank. Her 40-man unit was disbanded. They were sent to the Baron's coal mines as punishment. 3 weeks later, the mine collapsed. 40 men, all dead. Officially, an accident. Audrey stood motionless. Kai watched her face change, blow after blow, name after name. He didn't want to cause her pain, but he had to show her that he knew, that someone knew, that someone remembered. He began to call out the names. Not 16 like in the square, 40. Every soldier in her unit, name, age, rank. Lariah remembered because in the cage at the mines, she'd heard the miners calling out to one another before their shift. Every morning, every name. Audrey Valente listened to 12 names. On the 13th, her hand slipped off the hilt. On the 20th, she took a step back. On the 30th, her knees buckled. The sword clattered against the stone. She was kneeling in the basement doorway, her face wet. She wasn't sobbing. She wasn't sniffling. The tears just flowed on their own, silently, like water from a cracked pipe. Kai called out the last name, Sergeant Rowan Fitch, 23 years old, a recruit, killed in his first month of service. Silence. A long silence. Then Audrey raised her head. She looked at Kai. Her eyes were red. Her face was wet. Her voice was steady. She asked how he knew. Kai said it didn't matter. What mattered was that he knew, and that those people deserved to have their names spoken, not in a report, not in an archive, out loud. The golden panel flashed, plus 150 MK, condition fulfilled, to name someone else's pain without looking away. Resonance with Audrey Valente. Starting value, 20. Audrey picked up her sword. She stood up. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She said the contract was canceled. She said 15 silver coins weren't worth her honor. She paused. She said nothing was worth her honor because she had no honor left. She turned to leave. Kai said he had no money, no home, no food, but he had 22 children to protect, and a demoness wanted by the Inquisition, and 10 days until the inspection. And if she had nowhere to go, he had a floor in the basement. Audrey stopped. She didn't turn around. She stood with her back to him. Her shoulders were tense. Her fists were clenched. Then she slowly turned her head. She looked over her shoulder. She asked if he had at least some tea. Lariah, standing behind Kai, snorted, quietly, almost inaudibly. Audrey entered the basement. She sat down in the corner across from Lariah. They looked at each other, a demoness and a disgraced knight. Two women whom the world had cast aside. Lariah silently handed her a mug of cold tea. Audrey took it, took a sip, winced, said the tea was disgusting. Lariah said it was her first cup of tea in 200 years. Audrey looked at her, drank it down to the last drop. Kai sat down against the wall. The three of them in the basement. The beginning. The next morning, Audrey went out into the courtyard and began to warm up. Kai watched from the doorway. She moved like a machine, every movement precise, economical, not a single superfluous gesture. The sword in her hands sang, not a metaphor. The blade sliced through the air with a high-pitched whistle that echoed off the alley walls. She finished in half an hour. She looked at Kai. She said he was skinny, weak, slow. He'd never held anything heavier than a spoon. Kai agreed. She said that if he was going to survive 10 days, he needed to at least learn how to fall. Kai asked what she meant. She struck him in the chest with her open palm. He fell. It hurt. "That's it," she said. "Learn to fall so you can get back up." For the next 3 hours, she hit him. Not hard, but methodically. She taught him to tuck himself in. She taught him to take the blow. She taught him to roll. Kai fell and got back up. He fell and got up. He fell and got up. By the 20th fall, he could no longer feel his knees. By the 30th, he stopped counting. Lariah sat on the step and watched. Her face was unreadable. But when Audrey sent Kai to the ground yet again and he got right back up, Lariah nodded almost imperceptibly. That evening, Kai lay on the basement floor, unable to move. His entire body was one big bruise. Audrey sat against the wall, cleaning her sword. Lariah was stirring something in a bowl. Porridge, made from the grain Kai had handed out yesterday. They'd kept some for themselves. With the aura of satiety, a fist-sized portion was as filling as a full meal. Kai ate while lying down. Not the most dignified posture, but the only one available. Mira appeared in the doorway as usual. No knock, no warning, like a cat. She looked at Kai on the floor, at Audrey with her sword, at Lariah with her porridge. She said she'd gathered some information. Kai lifted his head. Mira crouched down. She said that Garen Mort had hired 2 more thugs, not like Audrey, cheap ones, street thugs. They're searching the slums for Kai, asking where the boy with the Demoness lives. So far, no one has told them. So far. She also said a new notice had appeared on the wall of City Hall, an Inquisition inspection, the seal of purity. The date had been moved up, not in 10 days, in 7. Kai lowered his head back to the floor. 7 days. Garen's thugs. The Inquisitor's inspection. A system that only works if he doesn't think about personal gain. A demoness with a creaking collar. A disgraced knight who drinks cold tea. 22 starving children. And himself, skinny, beaten up, lying on the basement floor. Mira looked at him, waiting for a reaction. Fear? Panic? Despair? Kai said that 7 days was a long time. At the orphanage, they'd once found homes for 14 children in 3 days. Mira didn't understand the part about the orphanage, but she understood the tone. He isn't afraid, or he's pretending not to be, or he's too stupid to be afraid. She snorted, stood up, said she'd bring a map of the slums tomorrow. Every alley, every basement, all the rooftops. She knows every stone in this neighborhood. Kai said thank you. Mira grimaced as if at something sour. She told him not to thank her. She isn't helping him, she's helping the children. She left. Lariah watched her go. She said quietly that there was something in the girl's blood. Something familiar. Not demonic. Something else. Something ancient. Kai asked what exactly. Lariah shook her head. She said she wasn't sure. The collar was dampening her senses. She couldn't be certain. But something that shouldn't be sleeping was slumbering in Mira Sawyer's blood. Kai made a mental note of it. He added it to the growing list of things he didn't understand but needed to figure out. At night, he lay there staring at the ceiling. Lariah was breathing quietly beside him. In the other corner, Audrey was snoring. Somewhere behind the wall, rats were scurrying. A golden panel flickered at the edge of his consciousness. He could have opened it, check his balance, look through the catalog, calculate his next move. He didn't. He closed his eyes. He thought about the 22 children, about Mira, who pretends she doesn't care, about Lariah, who stirs porridge with trembling hands, about Audrey, who drinks bad tea to the last drop without wincing. He thought that in his past life he'd had a table and a chair and a paycheck and hot water. But here there was a dirt floor and bruises and not a single coin. And for some reason, he didn't feel any worse. Maybe even better. He fell asleep. The panel didn't flicker. No charges, no conditions. Just a man who was tired and fell asleep next to those he'd come to consider his own. 7 days turned into 6, 6 into 5. Every morning Kai woke up and counted. Not money, days. Audrey pushed him from dawn until noon, falling, getting up, dodging, blocking. The body of a 17-year-old with muscular dystrophy wouldn't obey him. His muscles burned, his joints creaked. But Kai didn't complain. In his past life, he'd run marathons. This body didn't know how to run, but his mind remembered how to endure. On the 5th day of training, Audrey said he was hopeless. She paused. She added that he was hopeless but stubborn. That was better than being talented and lazy. Mira came every evening. She brought information. Garen's thugs were combing the slums. 2 men, former soldiers, not the brightest but dangerous enough for an unarmed boy. Mira knew their routes. She knew where they drank, where they slept, who they talked to. She was a shadow, invisible, silent. The children of the slums were better at this than any spy. On the 4th day before the inspection, what Kai had been waiting for and fearing happened. That morning, Lariah woke up and couldn't get up. The collar around her neck glowed with a dim crimson light. It pulsed like a heartbeat. She lay on the floor, breathing heavily. Kai knelt down beside her. He looked at the collar. The 3 symbols on the metal had once been clear. Now 2 of them were blurred. The 3rd was still intact. Lariah said there wasn't much time left. 2 weeks, maybe less. When the last symbol wore away, the collar would burst. Her power would surge outward. Every inquisitor on the continent would feel it. Kai asked if it was possible to remove the collar sooner, in a controlled manner. Lariah looked at him. She said it was possible, but to do so, they needed someone who would voluntarily take on a portion of her power. A blood bond. Her demonic energy would flow into the system's host, and the collar would no longer be needed. But it would kill a person if their body couldn't withstand it. Kai asked what the chances were that his body could withstand it. Lariah turned away. She didn't answer. That was her answer. Kai didn't press the issue. He lifted her up and sat her down against the wall. He brought her some water. She drank in small sips. Her hands were shaking. He draped his jacket over her shoulders. Audrey had found the jacket for him 2 days ago. She'd stolen it from a clothesline behind the tavern. Kai didn't approve, but he kept quiet. He was freezing, but there was only one jacket. Lariah clutched the fabric with her fingers. She said quietly that he was giving away his last possession again. Kai said it was just a habit of his. The panel flashed. Plus 15 MC. Small change, but honest small change. By noon, Lariah was able to sit up straight. By evening, she was standing. The collar had stopped pulsing. The 3rd symbol was holding. For now, at least. Mira arrived at dusk. She wasn't alone. Behind her stood a boy of about 8, skinny, big-eyed, shivering. Mira said his name was Toby. He lived in the eastern slums beyond the bridge. His mother had been taken away 2 days ago by Baron Vorn's debt collectors for unpaid taxes. They took her and drove her away. Toby didn't know where. Toby hadn't eaten in 2 days. Kai crouched down in front of the boy. Toby stared at him without blinking. His eyes were like those of a cornered animal. Kai recognized that look. He always did. He said he'd feed him, that he'd find his mother. Toby didn't believe him. It was obvious. But he sat down and took the bowl of porridge that Lariah held out to him. He ate greedily, burning his mouth, choking. The aura of satiety was working. A small portion of porridge filled his stomach like a full meal. Toby finished eating, He looked at Lariah, at her horns. He wasn't afraid. Children of the slums weren't afraid of demons. They were afraid of debt collectors. The panel flashed. Plus 30 MK. Resonance with Toby. Value 15. Kai mentally opened the panel. He looked through the catalog. He searched for a skill that would help him find a person. He found it. Thread of Memory, E rank. Allows the user to sense the direction of a person being sought by someone with a resonance value above 10. Price: 600 gold coins. Condition for use: find the lost person not for a reward, but because someone is crying. Kai looked at Toby. The boy wasn't crying. He'd forgotten how. But his hands were clenching an empty bowl so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. Kai stood up. He told Audrey he had to go. Audrey asked where. Kai said he was going to look for the boy's mother. Audrey said that was suicide. Vorn's collectors aren't just street thugs, they're people with seals. Kai said he wasn't going to fight. Audrey looked at him for a long time. Then she stood up. She took her sword. She said she was going with him. Lariah stood up too. Kai shook his head. He told her to stay. The horns. It wasn't even night yet, and the horns were too conspicuous. Lariah pressed her lips together. She wanted to argue. She didn't. She nodded. The three of them went out. Kai, Audrey, and Mira. Mira volunteered on her own. She said she knew the eastern slums like the back of her hand. She knew where the collectors held the debtors before shipping them out. An old warehouse by the river. That's where they took everyone. They held them for a day or two. Then they sent them to the Baron's mines or sold them to Garen. The circle was complete. Warn. Garen. The mines. Slavery. One system. One chain. They walked through Tenbrook at night. Mira led the way. Silent. Swift. She knew every turn, every passageway, every gap in the fence. Audrey followed Kay, hand on her sword, eyes in the dark. They found the warehouse in half an hour. A squat brick building right by the water. 2 guards at the door. A torch. Shadows. Silence inside. An ominous silence. The silence of people too afraid to breathe. Kai counted. 2 guards, both with clubs, one with a short sword. Not elite, ordinary mercenaries. Audrey could have taken them both out in 10 seconds. But Kai said no. Not like that. He walked up to the guards, alone, unarmed, hands in plain sight. The guards stared at him. A skinny kid in the middle of the night. One asked what he wanted. Kai said he'd come to take the people they were holding inside. The guard laughed. The second one did too. Kai didn't smile. He said he knew their names, both of them. He knew where they lived. He knew that the first one had a 7-year-old daughter who went to the temple school. He knew that the second one's mother was sick with the printed plague, and he was saving up for medicine. Mira. Mira found out everything in 2 hours. The children of the slums knew everything about everyone. The guards stopped laughing. Kai said he wasn't threatening them. He said he wanted to make a proposal. He knew where to get medicine for the printed plague. Not through the guild, not for gold. If they opened the door and left for half an hour, tomorrow he would tell them how to save their mother. Silence. The guards exchanged glances. The first one spat. He said it was a lie. There was no such cure. Kai looked him in the eyes. He activated the witness's gaze. 10 seconds. The guard turned pale. He took a step back. The second one reached for his sword. Audrey stepped out of the shadows, silently. She placed her hand on her sword. She didn't draw it. She just placed her hand there. That was enough. The second guard looked at Audrey, at her scar, at her eyes. He recognized in her the one who was not to be touched. He lowered his hand. They left, silently, quickly. They vanished into the darkness. Kai opened the door to the storage room. Inside it was dark and stank. 7 people, tied up, sitting on the dirt floor. 3 women, 2 men, an old man, a child. Toby's mother was second from the right, a young woman with a split lip and empty eyes. Kai untied them all. Audrey helped. Mira stood by the door and watched. Toby's mother looked at Kai and didn't understand what was happening. He told her that her son was waiting, that she was free, that they were all free. The woman opened her mouth, closed it. Tears streamed down her face. She didn't say a word. She just stood up and walked toward the door. The others followed her. The panel lit up. Plus 250 MK. Condition fulfilled. Free the captives without bloodshed. The thread of memory skill is unlocked, E rank. Directs you to a person being sought by someone with a resonance above 10. Radius 3 miles. Plus 35 resonance for each of the 7 freed captives. They returned to the basement by dawn. Toby saw his mother. He rushed to her. He wrapped his arms around her. He didn't cry. He didn't know how. But he clung to her so tightly that it was impossible to pry him away. Lariah stood in the corner and watched. Her eyes glowed in the semi-darkness, violet. Kai sat down on the floor. He was tired, exhausted. But inside there was something warm, familiar, from a past life. A feeling that couldn't be measured in MK or recorded on a tablet. Just a child hugging his mother. It was simply worth it. 4 days. Kai sat on the basement steps and watched the sunrise. A pink light crept across the rooftops of the slums. Beautiful. Even here it's beautiful. He opened his panel. Balance, 1025 MK. A lot by first week standards. Not enough by the standards of what he needed. In 4 days, the Inquisitor will place a hand on his chest and scan everything. The system, his skills, his connection to the Demoness. 1 scan and he'll be at the stake. Lariah is nearby. Kai was flipping through the catalog, looking for a way to pass the inspection, to find a skill that would hide the system from the Inquisitor. The Seal of the Void, rank S, hides the bearer's entire set of abilities from any scan for 1 hour. Price, 40,000 gold. Insanity. The price is a sacrifice, to give up his only chance at salvation for the sake of another, knowing there would be no replacement. Kai reread the condition 3 times. To give up his only chance for the sake of another, knowing there would be no replacement. He minimized the panel. He stood up. He went inside. Lariah was sitting with the children, 22 plus Toby. 23 children in the basement of an abandoned dye house. Lariah was teaching them to count, with sticks on the dirt floor. She had never taught children before, but her hands didn't tremble, and the children weren't afraid of her horns. They'd gotten used to them in a week. To them, she was Aunt Lyra, an aunt with horns who cooks delicious porridge and knows very long fairy tales. Kai looked at this scene and thought, the Seal of the Void. 1 hour, 1 scan, 1 check. But he didn't have just one person with a problem. He had 23 children whom no one was checking because no one needed them. He had Audrey, who didn't have guild documents. He had Lariah, who wouldn't pass any check under any circumstances. The Seal of the Void would hide him, but it wouldn't hide her. Lariah needed a different solution. Kai went out onto the street. He found Mira. She was sitting on the roof across the way, nibbling on a cracker. Kai asked if she knew anything about the Inquisitors who were coming for the inspection. Mira thought for a moment. She said there would be 3 Inquisitors, Tenbrook's High Priest, Valor, and 2 assistants. The inspection would last 3 days. The first day, the eastern districts. The second day, the market square and downtown. The third day, the slums. Kai asked why the slums were last. Mira smirked. She said it was because nobody cares about the slums. There's no money there, so there are no heretics. Heretics are those who can afford it. The poor are too busy surviving to worry about heresy. Kai nodded. The third day. They'll check the slums last. By the third day, the Inquisitors will be tired. They'll be rushing. They'll be inattentive. That's a chance. A small one, but a chance. He returned to the basement. He told Audrey and Lariah about the plan. Lariah needs to be hidden during the inspection. Get her out of the area altogether. Audrey would take her out of town for 2 days, into the woods, into the caves, anywhere there were no priests. Lariah said she wouldn't leave. Kai said it wasn't up for discussion. Lariah looked at him in a way that made the air in the basement grow colder. She said she was 218 years old. She'd survived 3 purge campaigns. She didn't need protection from a boy who, just a week ago, didn't even know how to hold a spoon in the right hand. Kai didn't back down. He said it wasn't about protection, it was about math. If she got caught, everyone would die. Him, the children, Audrey, Mira, everyone connected to him. If she left for 2 days, everyone would survive. Lariah was silent, for a long time. Then she said quietly that she hated it when he was right. The next day, Hana Jong arrived. Kai hadn't expected this. No one had. She appeared in the basement doorway like a ghost, small, slender, in a modest maid's dress, though Mira later said that dress was worth more than the entire basement. Hana Chong, the daughter of the Korean ambassador to Mervale, 19 years old, a herbalist. She had soft hands and a quiet voice, and she giggled, covering her mouth with her palm. She came because she had heard rumors of a boy from the slums who hands out food, frees prisoners, and reads the laws to kings. The rumors had reached the embassy district. They had reached the ears of the ambassador's daughter. But she didn't come out of curiosity. She came because her younger sister was dying. Yuna Jong, 16 years old, terminal stage plague. Ulcers covered her hands and neck. Her fever had not subsided for 3 weeks. The court physicians threw up their hands in despair. The guild healers took gold and did nothing. The only medicine that could help contained an ingredient the church had declared demonic, banned, destroyed. Anyone who uses it is burned at the stake. Hannah stood in the doorway and spoke calmly. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She stated the facts, like a report. But her hands were clenching the hem of her dress so tightly that the fabric had turned white. Kai listened. He asked what the ingredient was. Hannah said it was the root of the shadow vine, a plant that grows only in places with demonic energy. After the 3rd purge, all known thickets were burned to the ground. Lariah raised her head. She was sitting in the shadows. Hannah couldn't see her horns in the semi-darkness. Lariah said one word. "It's there." Hannah turned around. She saw the horns. She saw violet eyes. She didn't flinch. She didn't recoil. She looked. She assessed. She asked where. Lariah said, "In the basement of the old temple across the river. There's residual demonic energy there from before the purge. The vine might have survived, if the roots are deep enough." Hannah looked at Kai. She asked if he would help. Kai said he would. Hannah asked what he wanted in return. Kai said nothing. Hannah blinked. For the first time during the entire conversation, something other than composure flashed across her face. Confusion. She wasn't used to that answer. In the world of Ardavan, nothing comes for free. Kai said he needed to go to the old temple. Audrey said she'd go with him. Hannah said she'd go too. She's an herbalist. She knows how to gather the root. Without her, they'd ruin it. Lariah said she'd go too. Kai opened his mouth to object. Lariah cut him off. She said she was the only one who could sense the temple's demonic energy. Without her, they wouldn't find the root. Kai shut his mouth. She was right. They set out at night, the 4 of them. Mira stayed behind with the children. She grumbled. She said she wasn't a babysitter, but she stayed. The old temple stood across the river, 2 miles from the city walls. Ruins, a collapsed roof. Walls overgrown with ivy. 3 centuries of neglect. Lariah led the way. Her collar glowed faintly in the darkness. She could sense it. Energy. Weak, barely perceptible, like the smell of smoke from a fire extinguished a week ago, but she could sense it. They descended into the temple's basement. Total darkness. Audrey lit a torch. The walls were covered in moss. The floor was stone. Cracks. And in the cracks, something black. A vine, thin, almost dead, but alive, clinging to the stone with roots that reached deep into the ground. Hana dropped to her knees. Her hands were steady, quick. She took a small knife out of her bag. She began carefully digging around the root, quietly, carefully, like a surgeon. Lariah stood nearby, guiding her. Here, deeper, to the left. No, stop, to the right. Audrey stood guard at the entrance. Kai held the second torch, illuminating Hana's workspace. 20 minutes. Hana pulled out 3 roots, black, thin, pulsing with a faint purple light. She wrapped them in a cloth, hid them in her bag, pressed them to her chest, looked at Kai, at Lariah, said, "Thank you." Her voice broke on the second syllable. She covered her mouth with her hand. She turned away. Her shoulders were shaking. Kai didn't touch her. He didn't try to comfort her. He just stood beside her and waited. Sometimes that's all it takes, just standing beside someone and waiting. The panel flashed. Plus 80 MK. Resonance with Hana Chong. Starting value 20. They returned to the city before dawn. Hana headed for the embassy, quiet, focused. Her hands clutched the bag of roots. 3 days until the inspection. Kai was counting down. The seal of the void. The condition. To give up one chance for the sake of another. He'd been thinking about it the whole way back. One chance. What a chance. For what? 3 days until the inspection. Kai was thinking. To give up his only chance for another, knowing there would be no replacement. He sat on the roof of an abandoned dye house and looked out over the city. Tenbrook spread out before him like an open palm. Dirty, crowded, packed with people clinging to life like rats on a sinking ship. Somewhere in the center, the spires of City Hall rose up. Nearby, the spire of the cathedral. The inquisitors would come from there. The inspection would come from there. The panel hung at the edge of his vision. He could earn more MK, go out onto the street, help someone, earn points. But the seal of emptiness isn't about points. It's about an act, a specific act. And he couldn't plan it in advance. He couldn't prepare for it. Because if he prepared, it would be a calculation. And a calculation isn't an act. It's a deal. The system doesn't accept deals. On the morning of the second day, before the inspection, Hana came running, out of breath. Her eyes were red, but not from tears, from happiness. The root had worked. Yuna was breathing evenly. The sores had begun to fade. The fever had subsided. The court physicians were in shock. They don't understand what happened. Hana said she couldn't tell them the truth. If they found out she'd used a demonic ingredient, she herself would be burned at the stake. And her father. And the entire embassy. Kai nodded. He told her to keep quiet. Hana said she wanted to help. In any way she could. She's an herbalist. She knows 800 recipes. She can heal. She can prepare decoctions. She can make poultices. Kai said he didn't need recipes. He needed information. Hana raised her eyebrows. Kai asked if her father knew anything about the Great Consecration, about the ritual, about what was really behind it. Hana fell silent. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said quietly that her father had not come to Mervale on a diplomatic mission. He was here on orders from his emperor. His task was to find the keeper of the black market and forge an alliance. The empire across the ocean knew that the Great Consecration would destroy the remnants of the ancient system forever. And the emperor didn't want that. He needs an alternative to the guild. He needs the black market. Kai was processing all this. The empire across the ocean. The ambassador. The secret mission. The keeper. Lariah. It all pointed back to her. He asked if Hana's father knew that the keeper was here, in this city. Hana shook her head. Not yet. She hadn't told him. Kai asked why. Hana said it was because she wasn't sure her father would make the right choice. Politicians think in terms of states. She could see that Kai thought in terms of people. She identified more with the latter. Kai looked at her. A quiet girl with soft hands and 800 recipes in her head. The daughter of a spy who chose a penniless orphan over her father. The panel flashed. Resonance with Hana Chong. Current value, 30. 1 day until the check. Larea left with Audrey for the countryside. Kai stood in the doorway and watched them go. Audrey was carrying a bag with 3 days' worth of supplies. Larea walked beside her. The little one, in a hooded cloak hiding her horns. She stopped at the threshold, turned around, looked at Kai. She didn't say anything. He didn't say anything. She left. That evening, Kai sat alone in the basement. Mira had taken the children to another hideout for the duration of the inspection. Far from the basement. Far from him. If he were caught, the children mustn't suffer. Hannah had gone to the embassy. Toby and his mother were safe with relatives across the river. Kai was alone. Silence. He opened the panel. Balance, 1,400 MK. Skills, Witness's Gaze, F rank. Aura of Saturation, F rank. Choir of Names, D rank. Thread of Memory, E rank. 4 skills. None of them would help him pass the inspection. He needed the Seal of Void, S rank. The condition, to sacrifice his only chance for the sake of another. He couldn't have planned this. He couldn't have prepared for it. The morning of the trial, Day 1. The Eastern Districts. The Inquisitors began with the wealthy homes. Kai heard the temple bell ring 3 times. 3 strikes signaled the start of the trial. He emerged from the basement. He walked through the slums. Quiet. Empty. People had gone into hiding, even those who had nothing to hide. The Inquisition terrified everyone. Day 2. The Market Square. Kai saw them from afar. 3 men in white robes. The high priest, Valor. Tall. Thin. A face like an axe. 2 assistants, younger, quieter. They walked through the market and stopped at every stall. Hand on the chest, scan. Clear. Next. Hand on chest, scan. Clear. Next. An assembly line. Fast. Impersonal. Like a stamping machine. Kai watched. He counted. 7 seconds per person. 3 seconds for contact. 4 for the scan. The priest closed his eyes during the scan. For 4 seconds, he saw nothing around him. Kai memorized it. On the evening of the second day, he heard a scream. A woman's. From the alley behind the market. He ran. Without thinking. Without counting. He ran. An inquisitor was standing in the alley. One of the assistants. A young man. He was holding a girl of about 12 by the hand. The girl was crying. A woman stood nearby. The mother. On her knees. Begging. The inquisitor spoke in a steady, cold tone. He said that an unregistered ability had been discovered in the girl, a mark not listed in the guild's registry. The girl and her parents were to be detained and interrogated. The mother sobbed. She said it was a mistake, that the girl hadn't done anything, that it was simply a gift. The girl was born with it. She can sense when it's going to rain, that's all. Nothing more. She just senses the rain. The inquisitor wouldn't listen. Rules, the law, an unregistered ability. The girl would be taken to the temple, interrogated. If the ability was confirmed, the case would be sent to the capital. Kai stood at the entrance to the alley and watched. A 12-year-old girl. She could sense the rain, and for that they'd drag her off for questioning, and then, perhaps, to the stake. He took a step forward. The inquisitor turned his head. He saw him. A skinny boy, a nobody. Kai said the girl wasn't to blame. The inquisitor said it wasn't his business. Kai said he'd make it his business. The inquisitor frowned. He asked who he was. Kai gave his name. Kai Ashford, an orphan from the slums. The inquisitor lost interest in him. He turned back to the girl. Kai spoke louder. He said that he too had an unregistered ability. The inquisitor froze. He turned around slowly. He looked at Kai in a new light. Kai said that if the inquisitor needed a heretic, he was right there. The girl could go. Her ability was harmless. His was not. Silence. The girl's mother stared at Kai with her mouth agape. The girl stopped crying. The Inquisitor let go of the girl's hand. He stepped toward Kai. His eyes were sharp, intense. He said that if the boy was lying to distract him, the punishment would be threefold. Kai wasn't lying, but he wasn't about to stand there either. The Inquisitor reached out his hand toward Kai's chest. A scan, 3 seconds of contact, 4 readings. The mother grabbed the girl and ran off. The Inquisitor paid no attention. His eyes closed, reading. The panel inside Kai flared gold. Lines of text scrolled by. Condition met. To give up one's only chance at salvation for the sake of another, knowing there will be no replacement. The chance to pass the inspection unnoticed was given up voluntarily. The Seal of Emptiness skill is activated. S rank. All of the bearer's abilities are hidden from scanning. Duration, 1 hour. Activation is instantaneous. The Inquisitor opened his eyes. He withdrew his hand. He looked at Kai. Empty. Clean. Nothing. He grimaced. He said the boy was as empty as a barrel. Not a single ability. Not even the cheapest seal. He said a fine was due for the false statement, 3 copper coins. Kai spread his hands. He said he didn't have 3 copper coins. The Inquisitor spat. He told him to get lost. He turned and walked down the alley. Kai stood there, breathing. His heart was pounding so hard his ribs were shaking. He'd done it. The Seal of Emptiness. S rank. 1 hour. He'd just passed the test by giving up his only chance to pass it unnoticed. A paradox. The system had rewarded him precisely because he hadn't been thinking about the reward. He'd been thinking about the girl. The panel flashed again. Plus 500 MK, retroactive credit, multiple condition fulfillment, self-sacrifice without calculation, protection of the innocent, taking the risk upon oneself. New skill unlocked, breath of exchange. S rank. The user can transfer life force to another being in exchange for a portion of their own health. Kai blinked. 2 S-rank skills in 1 minute. In a single minute during which he hadn't thought about any ranks at all. He thought of Hana, her sister, the printed plague. The root had helped, but breath of exchange, that was on a whole other level. It could heal her completely. He ran to the basement. Hana had told him that her father, an ambassador, had been sent on a secret mission to find the keeper of the black market. Lariah and Audrey had left the city for the duration of the inspection. Kai met an Inquisitor who had detained a girl for her ability to sense rain and offered himself in her place. The system counted this as fulfilling the condition and activated the S-rank Seal of Emptiness. Kai passed the scan and additionally gained the S-rank Breath of Exchange skill. The night after the assessment. Kai sat in the basement and waited. He waited for Hana. He sent Mira with a note. 3 words. Come, there's a way. Hana arrived an hour later, quiet, cautious, wearing a maid's dress, her hood pulled low over her face. She sat down across from Kai. He explained. Breath of Exchange, S rank. He could transfer his life force to another being, heal them completely. But he would pay for it with a portion of his own health. Hana listened. Her face was expressionless. Only her hands. Her hands were trembling. She asked what the cost would be. Kai said he didn't know exactly. The system doesn't specify. A portion of health. It could be a week of weakness, maybe a month, maybe worse. Hana said she couldn't ask him for that. Kai said she wasn't asking, he was offering. Hana closed her eyes. Her lips moved silently. She was going over the recipes, weighing her options, looking for another way. She didn't find one. She opened her eyes. She said her sister was 13 years old. 13. She loves to draw butterflies and bake rice cakes, and laugh so loudly that the whole embassy courtyard can hear her. And she's dying. The root has slowed the disease. It hasn't stopped it. Yuna is getting weaker every day. Hana said she would accept his help, but only if he promised not to die. Kai said he'd try. Hana almost smiled. Almost. They went to the embassy, at night, through the back gate. Mira led them past the guards, a tiny shadow that knew every stone in this city. The Chan embassy occupied a 2-story house in the central district. Stone walls, a tiled roof, a garden behind the fence. Luxury by Tenbrook standards, poverty by the capital standards. Hana led him through the garden, past the sleeping servants, up the stairs to the second floor. Yuna's room. Small, clean. It smelled of medicine and lavender. A girl lay on the bed, as thin as a straw. Her skin was pale to the point of transparency, pale spots on her arms and neck, traces of sores. The root had taken effect, but the disease clung to her body. It wouldn't let go. Yuna was asleep. Her breathing was uneven, wheezing. Every breath was an effort. Kai sat down next to the bed. He looked at the girl, 13 years old. She loved butterflies, and drawing, and laughing. He raised his hand, placed his palm on her forehead. Warm, hot. The fever hadn't completely subsided. He activated the breath of exchange. The panel flashed. A golden light flowed through his hand, into the girl. Warm, soft, alive. Yuna sighed in her sleep, deeply. For the first time in weeks, deeply. The wheezing disappeared. Her breathing evened out. The sores on his hands paled even more, and began to fade, right before his eyes, one after another, like snow on a warm stone. Kai held her hand. The light flowed, and with every second he felt something leaving him. Warmth, strength, weight, as if his body were growing thinner, lighter, more transparent. 1 minute, 2, 3. In the 4th minute, the panel flashed red. Warning, critical transmission level, interruption recommended. Kai withdrew his hand. Yuna lay still. Her breathing was even, quiet. Her complexion had changed, no longer pale, rosy, alive. The sores had disappeared, every single one. Hana stood against the wall, both hands pressed to her mouth. Her eyes were wet. She looked at her sister, at her steady breathing, at her clear skin, at her pain-free face. Then she looked at Kai. He was sitting on the floor next to the bed, pale, ashen, dark circles under his eyes. His hands were trembling. His body had paid the price. He didn't know exactly how much, but he could feel it. Weakness, deep, heavy, like after a long illness. Hana dropped to her knees in front of him. She took his hands, cold, trembling. She said he was crazy. She said he was an idiot. She said, "Thank you." Kai tried to smile. It came out crooked. He said, idiot was his middle name. Hana didn't laugh. She was crying, quietly. Pressing his hands against her face, the panel flashed. Plus 500 MK, condition fulfilled. To give a part of oneself for another's child without hesitation. Resonance with Hana Jung. Current value, 50. Resonance with Yuna Jung. Starting value, 30. Kai closed his eyes. The world swam before him. Hana lifted him up. Small, slender, but her arms were strong. The arms of a herbalist. She laid him down on the sofa in the next room, covered him with a blanket, brought him a herbal tea, bitter, herbal. He drank it. She sat beside him, didn't leave, watched him. He fell asleep, woke up to voices. Morning, light streaming through the window. Hana was standing nearby, and across from her was a man, not very tall, sturdy, dark hair streaked with gray, piercing eyes. Ambassador Chong, Hana's father. He was looking at Kai, not hostile, not friendly, appraisingly. Hana was speaking quietly and quickly, in a language Kai didn't understand. The ambassador listened. Then he turned to Kai. He spoke in a common language. He asked if it was true that he had cured his daughter. Kai sat down. His head was spinning. He said he had helped her, not cured her, helped her. The ambassador looked at him for what felt like a long minute. Then he said that in his country there was a saying, "He who saves one child earns the gratitude of a family. He who saves a stranger's child earns the trust of a nation." Kai didn't answer. The ambassador paused. He said he knew who Kai Ashford was. A boy from the slums, an orphan, a nobody. But his daughter says otherwise. And his youngest daughter is breathing steadily for the first time in a month. He said he wouldn't ask how. And he wouldn't ask why. He would ask only one thing: what Kai wants. Kai said he needed time. The ambassador nodded. Kai asked for something else: information. Everything the ambassador knew about the Great Consecration, about the ritual, about Archbishop Hortense, about everything. The ambassador looked at him. A minute passed. Then he sat down in a chair and began to speak. The Great Consecration, a ritual devised not by priests but by Hortense himself. Its purpose is not protection from demons. Its purpose is the complete destruction of the world's connection to the ancient skill system. When the ritual is complete, not a single person on the continent will be able to acquire an ability except through the guild. A monopoly. Absolute. Forever. But that's not all. To complete the ritual, Hortense needs a key. A seal key. Implanted in the blood of the heir to one of the ancient houses. A house that Hortense destroyed 10 years ago. The Sawyer house. Kai froze. Sawyer. Mira Sawyer. The ambassador continued. The House of Sawyer held the last access seal to the Dark Market's core. The seal was passed down through the bloodline. Hortense slaughtered the entire family to extract it. But he didn't find it. The seal was with the youngest daughter, a 4-year-old girl who vanished on the night of the massacre. She was never found. Neither Hortense nor the Emperor's spies. No one. Kai sat motionless. Mira Sawyer, a 14-year-old pickpocket from the slums. Sassy, distrustful. She calls him a fool. The lost heiress of the Sawyer house. The key to the ritual lies in her blood, a key that Hortense has been searching for 10 years. Lariah had said that something ancient slumbered in Mira's blood. Now he knew exactly what it was. The panel didn't flicker. No charges. It wasn't an action. It was knowledge. And knowledge is free. But it sends a chill through him. Kai returned to the slums around noon. Weak. Pale. Every step was a struggle. The breath of the exchange had taken more out of him than he'd expected. His body felt like a wrung-out rag. Mira was waiting by the basement. She was sitting on the steps, biting her nails. She saw him and jumped to her feet. She looked at him. She grimaced. She said he looked like a corpse. Kai said he was just tired. Mira didn't believe him. She didn't believe anything at all. That's what kept her alive. Kai sat down on the step next to her. He looked at her. Mira Sawyer, 15 years old, maybe 14. She didn't know for sure herself. A dirty face, sharp cheekbones, eyes like a cat's. Quick, alert, always looking for a way out. A pickpocket, an orphan, a child of the slums, and the lost heiress of an ancient house in whose blood lies the key to a ritual capable of changing the world. She didn't know. She couldn't have known. She was 4 when her family was slaughtered. She remembered nothing. Not her home, not her parents, not the name she was given at birth. Only the slums. Only hunger. Only her brother who died of the printing plague. Kai couldn't tell her. Not now. Not like this. He had to prepare her. Protect her. Find a way to remove the key from her blood before Hortense got to her. But for that, he needed Lariah. Lariah would be back tomorrow. Mira asked why he was looking at her like that. Kai looked away. He said he was thinking. Mira snorted. She said he was always thinking. Thinking too much. He should eat more and think less. She tossed him a cracker. He caught it, took a bite, hard as a rock. Perfect. The Inquisitor's inspection was proceeding as usual. Day 3, the slums. Kai heard the bell ring 3 times that morning. The Inquisitors began their rounds. The seal of the void. 1 hour. He'd already used it up yesterday. The panel showed it was depleted. 24 hours until reactivation. 18 had passed. 6 hours until recharging. The Inquisitors were in the slums. They were going from house to house, slowly, wearily. Mira was reporting. They'd checked the eastern edge, then the northern corner. They're moving toward the center of the slums. They'll reach the dye house basement in 3 or 4 hours. 4 hours. 2 hours until the seal recharges. A 2-hour window. Enough. Kai waited. He counted the minutes. 1 hour passed. 2. As the 3rd hour drew to a close, the panel flashed. The seal of the void is available. Recharge complete. He activated it. 1 hour. 20 minutes later, Priest Valère entered the alley, the Chief Inquisitor, in person. He had one assistant with him. The second one stayed on the neighboring street. Valère walked down the alley, knocking on doors. "Open up! Inspection! In the name of the Church of Light!" Kai stepped out of the basement. He stood against the wall, calm, steady, hands at his sides. Valère saw him. He approached, looked down at him. A face like an axe, eyes like 2 nails. He asked his name. Kai gave it. Valère asked his occupation. Kai said he was an orphan, a day laborer. Valère held out his hand, placed it on Kai's chest, a cold palm through the thin fabric. Kai didn't flinch. The seal of the void, S rank, all abilities concealed. Valère closed his eyes. 3 seconds. 4. He opened them. Empty. Clean. He withdrew his hand, didn't say a word, walked on. Kai exhaled. Slowly, quietly. It worked. The test was passed. He returned to the basement, sat down on the floor, closed his eyes. His hands were trembling, not from fear, from exhaustion. The breath of exchange was still draining his strength. His body craved rest, food, warmth. He had none of the 3. That evening, Lariah and Audrey returned. Lariah entered first. She looked at Kai. Her expression changed. She saw his condition. Pale, thin, even thinner than before. Dark circles under his eyes, trembling hands. She knelt down beside him. She asked what he had done. Kai told her. Everything. Hana, Yuna, the breath of exchange, the test, the girl with the gift of sensing rain, the seal of emptiness, Ambassador Chong, and most importantly, Mira Sawyer. The key seal. Ortans. Lariah listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was silent for a long time. Then she said that he had nearly died in the 3 days without her. Kai said it wasn't just nearly. Far from it. Lariah didn't smile. She said she knew about the Sawyer house. She knew about the key seal. She didn't know that Mira was the heiress. Now she knows. And now everything has become more complicated. Because Ortans will find out too, sooner or later. Garen Mort. Garen saw Mira next to Kai. Garen works for Vorn. Worn works for Ortans. A chain. Long but direct. If Garen tells Worn about the girl from the slums named Sawyer, and if Worn passes that on to Ortans, when, it's only a matter of time. Kai said they needed to leave Tenbrook. Lariah nodded. Audrey said she agreed. Mira, who had entered the basement a minute ago and heard the last 2 sentences, asked where they were going. Everyone looked at her. She was standing in the doorway. Her arms were crossed over her chest. Her chin was raised. Her eyes were wary. Kai said to the capital. Mira raised her eyebrows. She said he'd completely lost his mind. Orthans is in the capital. The Inquisition is in the capital. They're preparing for the great consecration in the capital. And he wants to go there? Kai said that was exactly why. Mira looked at him. For a long time. Then she said, "All right." But first, they had to pick up the children. She wasn't going to leave 23 children unsupervised in the slums. Kai said they'd take the children with them. Audrey choked on her words. She said he was proposing to lead a group of 23 orphans halfway across the country to the capital, where they wanted to kill them. Kai said, "Yes, something like that." Audrey looked at the ceiling, then at Kai, then at Larea. Larea shrugged. She said she'd known he was crazy from the moment he bought her for a coin. Mira snorted. She said she'd go gather the children. She left. Hannah arrived an hour later, with 2 sacks: medicine, bandages, dried herbs, food, rice, jerky, crackers. She said she was going with them. Kai asked, "What about the embassy? What about Father?" Hannah said that Father knew, and Father approved, because his mission was to find the Keeper, and the Keeper was heading to the capital, so his daughter had to be by her side. Politics and concern all rolled into one. Kai didn't argue. That night, he lay in the basement for the last time. Tomorrow, they'd leave. Larea was beside him. Audrey was snoring in the corner. Somewhere behind the wall, Mira was rustling about. The children were sleeping in the neighboring basement. Hannah had gone to the embassy to gather their final belongings. 5 adults, 23 children, a demoness, a disgraced knight, a pickpocket with a secret in her blood, a spy's daughter, and him, a skinny orphan with a system that only works if he doesn't cheat. They're heading to the capital, against the Regent Archbishop, against the Skills Guild, against the White Stitch Order, against a system that has been grinding down people like them for 3 centuries. Kai closed his eyes. The panel flickered. Balance, 2,425 MK, 6 skills, 4 F and E ranks, 2 S ranks. Resonance with 5 people above 20, with 1 above 50. Not a single witness in the hundreds. Not yet. He thought about the world, about the key in her blood, about what she doesn't know, about what he has to tell her. But not today. Let her sleep today. Tomorrow, they'll hit the road. Tomorrow, everything else begins. He fell asleep. In his dream, he was standing on wet asphalt. A little girl at the crosswalk. The screech of brakes. He runs. He shields her with his body. A crash. But this time, he doesn't fall. He stands there, and the girl looks at him with violet eyes. Kai activated the Seal of the Void and passed Priest Vaylor's inquisitorial test. Larea returned and learned that Mira was the lost heiress of the Sawyer house, with the key seal in her blood. The team decided to leave Tenbrook for the capital and take 23 children with them. Hannah Chong joined the group with her father's, the ambassador's, approval. Kai's balance reached 2,425 MK and 6 skills. They left Tenbrook at dawn. 23 children, 5 adults. 1 wagon that Audrey had managed to get from a junk dealer in exchange for a promise to return it. Larea wore a cloak with a deep hood. Her horns pressed against the fabric, forming 2 bumps. From a distance, it looked like a strange hairstyle. Up close, it wouldn't fool anyone. Mira walked ahead, scouting the way. Hannah brought up the rear, watching over the children, checking their feet for blisters and scrapes, and giving herbal tea to those who were coughing. Audrey drove the wagon. The younger ones sat in the wagon, Toby and 4 others under the age of 7. Kai walked beside Larea, silently. He still hadn't recovered from the breath of exchange. His body was weak, his head spun with sudden movements. But he walked. It was a 4-day walk to the capital of Mirvale, maybe 5 with the children. The road led through fields, then through a forest, then through the foothills. Kai kept track. 4 days in the open with 23 children and a demoness. Any patrol, any inquisitor, any informant. 1 encounter and it's all over. On the 2nd day of their journey, they encountered a merchant caravan. 3 wagons, 6 guards. A merchant from the eastern provinces, fat, cheerful. He was taking fabrics to the capital for the Festival of Consecration. He saw the column of children and stopped. He asked who they were. Kai said they were from an orphanage, orphans. He was taking them to the capital for the festival. The merchant looked at the ragged children, at the skinny boy without proper clothes, at the woman with a scar and a sword. He snorted. He said the road was dangerous, bandits in the forest. He suggested they travel together. It would be safer. Kai agreed. They traveled with the caravan for 2 days. The merchant turned out to be kind. He fed the children, told them stories, laughed. The children warmed up to him. Even Mira stopped scowling and listened to his tales with her mouth agape, though she pretended to be bored. On the 3rd night, by the campfire, the merchant sat down next to Kai. Quietly, no smile. He said he knew the girl in the cloak wasn't human. Kai froze. The merchant said he had a keen eye. 30 years on the road, he'd seen it all. You can hide horns under a hood, but you can't hide a silhouette. Kai said nothing. He waited. The merchant said he didn't care. His brother had been married to a half-demon. They'd burned them both during the purge. Ever since then, the merchant had hated the inquisitors and distrusted the church. He said he'd keep their secret, and that he'd take her all the way to the capital. Kai looked at him. The words, "thank you," stuck in his throat. The merchant waved his hand. He said there was no need to thank him. He said that if there is a God, he isn't in the temples, but on the roads, among those who walk. The panel flashed. +20 MK. Not for Kai's action, for the merchant. The system noted that people begin to behave differently around the carrier. Resonance with merchant Dalton Mary. Starting value, 10. On the 4th day, they saw the capital, Mervale, a city on a hill. White walls, golden spires. The cathedral of light in the center, like a giant blade pointing toward the sky. Beautiful, majestic. Kai looked at this city and saw not beauty. He saw a fortress, an enemy fortress. The merchant drove them to the eastern gates, said goodbye, ruffled Toby's hair, winked at Mira, drove off. Kai stood before the capital's gates and counted. 5 people, 23 children, 0 money, 0 connections, 0 plan. In the city, Archbishop Regent Ortans, the Guild of Skills, the Order of the White Stitch, the Army, the Inquisition. And all they had was a demoness with a crackling collar and a skinny guy with a system that wouldn't tolerate lies. Audrey stood beside him. She looked at the walls. She said she knew the capital. She'd served here for 2 years. She knew the barracks, she knew the streets. She knew where to hide. Hannah said her father had a contact in the capital, a trading house that sympathized with their cause. They could hide the children for a while. Mira said the capital was just a big slum. She knew her way around slums. Lariah said nothing. She was looking at the cathedral. Her violet eyes glowed beneath her hood. Kai understood. She recognized this place. She'd been here before. A long time ago. 300 years ago, when the black market was still in operation, when the cathedral wasn't a temple of light, but the Hall of the Tablets, a place where anyone could come and trade their deeds for power, a place that had been stolen from her. Kai touched her shoulder. Shh. She turned her head. He said they would get it back. Lariah didn't answer, but her hand squeezed his fingers for a moment, quickly, tightly, and then let go. They entered the city. They spent their first week in the capital in hiding. Hannah settled the children in the basement of the Chongli trading house in the Eastern District. It was dry and warm, with 3 meals a day. For the first time in months, the children slept on mattresses. Toby wouldn't let go of his mother's hand, even in his sleep. Mira was gone from morning till night, exploring the capital. The streets, the alleys, the rooftops, the sewers. Within 3 days, she knew the Eastern District like the back of her hand. Within 5 days, the Central District. Audrey found an old colleague, Sergeant Vic. He'd been discharged from the army due to a wound. Now he ran a tavern by the southern gate. Sergeant Vic didn't ask any questions. He poured some beer, he listened. He told her that things were unsettled in the city. The great consecration was scheduled for 3 weeks from now. Hortense was gathering inquisitors from all the provinces. The White Seam was out in full force. 200 hunters, the church's finest fighters. And among them was Lena Castor, a first blade hunter, the very one. She was in the capital. Kai listened and fell into thought. Lena Castor. He remembered the name from the dossier Lariah had compiled. The daughter of a heretic burned at the stake 12 years ago. She had joined the order to atone for her father's sin. 10 years without a smile. 10 years without tears. She sincerely believes she is destroying evil, and she was coming for him. That inquisitor in Tenbrook had reported a strange boy. The report reached the capital. It reached the order. It reached Lena. She's coming. The question is, when? Lariah sat in a room on the second floor of the trading house and didn't come out. The collar was pulsing faster. The second symbol had faded completely. Only one remained. The last one. She said 2 weeks, maybe 10 days. Then the collar would burst. And then every inquisitor in the city would turn their head toward her. Kai said they'd make it in time. Lariah asked what he was going to do. Kai explained. The great consecration. A ritual in the cathedral. Hortense would perform it personally. To complete it, they needed the key seal made from the blood of the heir to the Sawyer house. Hortense had been searching for Mira for 10 years. He hasn't found her, so he'll use a substitute, a surrogate, some artifact or sacrifice. That will weaken the ritual, make it vulnerable. If, at the moment of the ritual, someone with access to the black market stands at the altar and names the witnesses, if the faith of those witnesses is strong enough, the ritual can be broken. Not canceled, broken, reversed, to reveal what Hortense wants to seal away forever. Lariah listened. She was silent. Then she said that to do this, he would need witnesses. A resonance of 100. He doesn't have a resonance of 100 with a single person. Kai nodded. 3 weeks. He needed to bring at least one person to a resonance of 100 within 3 weeks. Lariah said that resonance wasn't a score. It couldn't be trained. It couldn't be rushed. It only grew when 2 people went through something real together. Kai knew that. He wasn't going to train. He was going to live, and hope that life would be enough. On the 10th day, everything changed in the capital. Mira ran in that evening, out of breath, pale. She said that Garin Mort was in town. He'd arrived 3 days ago. He was accompanied by 2 of Baron Vorn's men. They were looking for Kai, looking for Mira. They knew the group was in the capital. Someone had spotted them on the road. Someone had ratted them out. Kai asked if Garin knew where they were hiding. Mira said not yet, but he was asking around. Everywhere. Paying people off. A lot. It was only a matter of time. Kai looked at Lariah. Lariah looked at him. They both thought the same thing. Garin was working for Vorn. Vorn was working for someone higher up. If Garin finds out about Mira Sawyer, and if he connects the surname to the Sawyer family. Kai stood up. He said they had to find Garin first. Audrey raised her sword. Kai shook his head. Not like that. Not with a sword. He needed Garin alive. He needed information. The connection between Vorn and Hortense. Evidence. A chain of evidence. They found Garin through Mira, a tavern in the harbor district. Dirty, smelly. Garin was sitting in a corner, drinking, alone. His men were outside. Kai walked in, alone, unarmed. He sat down across from Garin. The slave trader stared at him. He recognized him. He turned pale. Then he grimaced. He said the kid had gotten completely out of hand. Kai said he'd come to talk. Garin said he had nothing to discuss with a beggar. Kai placed a sheet of paper on the table. A list. Names, dates, amounts. Every one of Garin's deals over the past year. Every slave. Every sale. every bribe paid to the guards. Mira had obtained it through her children in a week. Children of the slums are invisible. They get everywhere. They hear everything. Garen stared at the list. His face was ashen. Kai said quietly that this list might end up with the magistrate, or with the order. The slave trade is illegal even in Mervale, technically. The law exists. It isn't enforced, but it exists. It's one thing when the Baron turns a blind eye. It's another when a list of names lands on the Inquisitor's desk. Garen licked his lips. He asked what Kai wanted. Kai said he wanted to know who was above Vorn, who gives the orders, who pays for the purge. Garen fell silent for a long time. Then he said one name. Ortans, the Archbishop Regent himself. Vorn is his enforcer in the provinces. Money from the slave trade goes into the Order's treasury, to the White Seam, to the Consecration, to the Inquisitors. It's all connected. It's all one chain. Kai asked about the House of Sawyer. Garen flinched. He said he knew nothing. Kai looked him in the eyes, the witness's gaze. 10 seconds. Garen turned pale. He started talking quickly. The Sawyer family. Ortans ordered them destroyed 10 years ago, personally. Warren carried out the order. They were slaughtered at night, the whole family. They were looking for a child. A girl. They didn't find her. Ortans is furious. He's been searching ever since. Everywhere. Anyone with the last name Sawyer is being investigated. Anyone. Kai took the list off the table. He stood up. He told Garen that he would leave the capital tonight. For good. If he's seen in Mervale again, the list will go to the Inquisitors. Garen nodded. Quickly. Often. Like a little fool. Kai left the tavern. Audrey was waiting on the street. Mira was on the roof across the way. He said they had 2 weeks, and that Ortans was still looking for Mira, so he doesn't know she's here. Not yet, anyway. The group settled into the capital of Mervale through Hannah and Audrey's contacts. Kai devised a plan to disrupt the Great Consecration at the moment of the ritual using the witnesses. Laria's collar is nearly destroyed. Kai interrogated Garen Mort and confirmed Vorn's connection to Ortans and that Ortans personally ordered the Sawyer house to be razed. Lena Castor found Kai on the 14th day in the capital. He was walking down Market Street. Alone. He was heading toward the trading house. In an alley between 2 shops, he was ambushed. A blow to the back. He crashed into the wall. He spun around. A woman stood before him. 24 years old, black hair pulled back into a bun, expressionless gray eyes. A white seam uniform, white with silver embroidery. A sword at her belt, not a decorative one, but a working sword, polished by thousands of strikes. Lena Castor, a first blade hunter. She didn't speak. She stepped forward. The sword left its sheath so quickly that Kai didn't see the movement. He only heard a whistle and pain. His left arm cracked. She had broken his forearm with a single flat blow. Kai fell to one knee. The pain shot through his entire body. White, sharp, a flash before his eyes. Lena stood over him. She pressed the tip of her sword to his throat. Cold metal, a thin line between life and death. She stated flatly that he was accused of heresy, of using forbidden abilities, of associating with a demonic entity, of violating the seal of purity. The sentence? Execution, to be carried out immediately. Kai looked up at her. Pain, fear, clarity, a strange clarity. Just like back then on the asphalt when he was running toward the girl, he knew it would hurt. He ran. He said one name, Jonas Castor. Lena didn't move. The sword didn't waver. But something flashed in her eyes, quickly, like the shadow of a bird. Kai continued. He said that Jonas Castor, a merchant, burned at the stake 12 years ago, accused of heresy based on a denunciation. The denunciation number was 874. The denunciation was filed anonymously, but the order's registry bore the seal of the person who filed it, the seal of Archbishop Regent Ortans. Lena didn't move, not a single muscle, but the tip of the sword at Kai's throat trembled, microscopically. Kai spoke, quietly, steady, through the pain. He said that Jonas Castor was not a heretic. He was the last dark market trader before Orton's. He knew the truth. He knew that Orton's himself traded on the market. He himself bought forbidden skills. He himself used the system that he later declared heresy. Jonas was a witness. Orton's eliminated the witness, through the order, through his daughter who has worn the white robe for 10 years and thinks she is atoning for her father's sin. Silence. Long, heavy. Lena stood there, a sword at her throat, her eyes like 2 gray stones. Not a single tear, not a tremor, only the tip of the sword. It trembled. She asked how he knew the denunciation number. Kai said that the keeper of the dark market remembers every transaction and every denunciation from the past 300 years. Her memory is an archive, a living archive. Everything recorded on the tablets remains within her. Lena moved the sword away from her throat. Slowly. She sheathed it. Her hands moved automatically, like a puppet's. She looked at Kai, through him, past him, at the wall, into the past. 12 years, 10 of them she had spent killing in the name of the church, in the name of the order, in the name of the man who burned her father. Kai stood up. His left arm hung limply, broken. Pain. But he stood. He didn't run, didn't attack, didn't press the advantage. He just stood and waited. Lena turned around. She left, with quick steps, didn't look back, disappeared around the corner. The panel flashed. Plus 800 MK. Condition fulfilled. Spare the one who tried to kill you while looking you in the eye. Skill unlocked. Blade of reflected pain. Rank B. Any damage dealt to the wearer while they are not defending is reflected back at the attacker as phantom pain. Duration, 30 seconds. Resonance with Lena Castor. Starting value, -30. Current value, 0. Kai leaned against the wall. His arm. He needed a healer. Hannah. He stumbled toward the trading house. Hannah applied a splint. She gave him a herbal brew to drink. She scolded him in a quiet voice. She said he was crazy, that you shouldn't put your throat on the line for the sake of pretty words. Kai said those weren't pretty words. It was the truth. Hannah fell silent. She bandaged his arm. Then she said quietly that he was right. The truth is the only weapon that doesn't break. Lariah came down that evening. She saw his arm in the splint. Her eyes flashed. Her claws extended. She asked who it was. Kai told her. Lariah hissed. She said she would kill the hunter. Kai said not to. Lena would return. Lariah asked how he knew. Kai said he knew. He just knew. Because he'd seen her eyes. The eyes of a person whose world had come crashing down. People like that don't run away. They come back, to figure things out. Lena returned 3 days later, at night, without her uniform, in plain clothes. She knocked on the door of the trading house. Mira opened it. She saw her. She reached for her knife. Lena raised her empty hands. She said she hadn't come to kill, she'd come to ask questions. Kai came out. His arm was in a splint. Lena looked at his arm. Something flashed across her face. A shadow. Maybe shame. Maybe not. They talked until dawn. Kai told her everything. The black market, the system, Ortans, the Sawyer house, the great consecration. Lariah sat beside him. She confirmed what he said. She added details. She showed the tablet, the denunciation number, Ortan's seal. Everything matched. Lena listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't argue. She sat still, hands on her knees. Her face was stony. When they finished, she was silent for 10 minutes. Then she stood up. She removed the order's medallion from her neck, a silver circle engraved with a sword. She placed it on the table. She said the order was dead to her. She said Ortans would pay, not for heresy, for her father. The panel flashed. Resonance with Lena Castor. Current value, 20. 1 week before the Great Consecration. Laria's collar snapped during the night. Quietly, without an explosion, the metal split in two and fell to the floor with a faint clink. Laria woke up and gasped for breath. Violet light gushed from her like water from a burst dam. It filled the room. Kai woke up from the flash. He saw her. Laria stood in the middle of the room. Her horns glowed. Her eyes were like two violet suns. Her hair stood on end. A wind that wasn't there swirled around her. She was different. Not the girl from the cage, not the refugee in dirty bandages. The guardian of the dark market, the last of her kind. 218 years of power compressed into a single body, and that power was now free. Kai stood up. He walked toward her. She looked down at him. The light in her eyes pulsed. Inhuman. Ancient. She said they were leaving. Every inquisitor within a 100-mile radius sensed it. Now. Right now. They had minutes. Kai nodded. The blood bond. The only option. Laria nodded. She held out her hand. Kai took it. Her fingers were hot, almost scorching. She said it might kill him. Kai said he knew. She said that if he died, she wouldn't survive it. For the first time in all the time he'd known her, the first time she'd ever said something like that. Kai squeezed her hand tighter. He said he wouldn't die. He had a habit of not dying. She didn't smile. She closed her eyes. Light flowed through their clasped hands, from her to him. Hot, heavy, foreign, and yet familiar, as if this power had always been a part of him, just waiting. Pain, wild, twisting. Every cell in his body was burning. Every bone was throbbing. Kai clenched his teeth. He didn't let go of her hand. He didn't close his eyes. He looked at her. She looked at him. Her violet eyes met his, and gradually the light faded. The pain receded. The power settled inside him, heavy, calm, like a river that had found its course. Laria exhaled. The light went out. Her horns stopped glowing. She staggered. Kai caught her. She was weightless, even lighter than she'd been by the cage. The power had flowed from her into him. Not all of it, just a part, but enough that the collar was no longer needed, enough that her presence no longer screamed to the whole world. The panel flashed. The blood bond was established. The demonic energy was integrated. All of the bearer's skills have been boosted by 2 ranks. Witness's gaze, D rank. Aura of saturation, D rank. Choir of names, B rank. Thread of memory, C rank. Seal of void, S rank, unchanged. Breath of exchange, S rank, unchanged. Blade of reflected pain, A rank. A new skill has been unlocked. Voice of the tablet, S rank. The bearer can utter the names of the witnesses and activate their faith as physical power. Range, the entire city. Kai looked at the panel. Voice of the tablet. This is it. This is the key. Laria lay in his arms, weak, pale, but alive. She looked at him. She whispered that he had survived. Kai said he had promised. She closed her eyes. Her lips trembled. She whispered that her real name was Laria Vern Cassadir, daughter of the Demon King, illegitimate, unwanted, banished, but a daughter nonetheless. Kai wasn't surprised. He had suspected as much. Laria said that her father had made a deal with Ortans a long time ago, long before the Purge. Ortans gained access to the dark market. The Demon King gained the right to destroy all the Guardians except one, his own daughter, to control the system so that no one else could use it. The Purge wasn't a war between humans and demons. The Purge was a deal between 2 predators who divided the world between them. Kai listened. He held Laria close. She spoke. For the first time in her life, she told him everything, without holding anything back, without putting up a wall. Her father wanted her back, to use her, as the key to the system, Hortense wanted the same thing. She was an object to both of them, a tool, a key, a commodity. For 200 years she had been on the run, from her father, from Hortense, from the world, until she ended up in a cage at the Tenbrook market, and a beggar boy bought her for a coin and didn't ask her name. The panel flashed. A resonance with Lariah Verne Cassidyr. Current reading, 80. Lena arrived this morning, with news. Hortense knows the keeper is in town. A surge of power was detected last night. The Inquisition is on high alert. The White Seam is combing the city. They have 2 days, maybe less. Kai gathered everyone, Lariah, Audrey, Mira, Hannah, Lena. 6 people in a room at the trading house. He said the Great Consecration is in a week, but they won't wait a week. They'll strike tomorrow night. While Hortense searches the slums for Lariah, they'll enter the cathedral, the altar, the tablet, the voice of the tablet, the names of the witnesses. He'll disrupt the ritual before Hortense can begin it. Audrey said there were guards in the cathedral. Lena said she knew the layout. Every post, every shift. She'd walked those corridors for 10 years. Mira said she knew the sewers beneath the cathedral, an exit leading straight to the crypt. Hannah said she'd prepare everything they needed. Smoke bombs, sleeping powders, distractions. Lariah said she'd go with him, all the way. Kai looked at each of them. At Audrey, who'd lost everything 8 months ago and found a new squad. At Mira, who trusts no one but him. At Hannah, who left the embassy for the sake of the truth. At Lena, who took off her uniform and found her father. At Lariah, who had waited 200 years for someone to ask her name. The panel flashed silently. Resonance with Audrey Valente, 50. Resonance with Mira Sawyer, 60. Resonance with Hannah Chong, 55. Resonance with Lena Castor, 40. Resonance with Lariah, 80. Not a single witness, not 1 in 100. But close, very close. Lariah's collar snapped, and Kai accepted the blood bond, surviving the integration of demonic energy. All skills were boosted by 2 ranks, and the S-rank skill, Voice of the Tablet, was unlocked. Lariah revealed that she is the daughter of the Demon King, and that the purge was a deal between Hortense and her father. The team decided to attack the cathedral tomorrow night. Night. The Cathedral of Light stood on the hill like a white bone piercing the sky. The moon illuminated the spires. The stained glass windows were dark from within. No light, no sound, but Kai knew it wasn't empty inside. Guards, priests, and Hortense. Hortense, who hadn't waited a week. Hortense, who had begun the ritual today. Lena had sent word an hour before the start. Her former comrade in the order had relayed the message. Hortense had sensed a surge of Lariah's power. He realized the keeper was nearby. He decided not to wait. He began the consecration ahead of schedule. Without the key seal. With a surrogate. Weaker. But if he completes it, there's no turning back. The black market will die forever. They walked through the sewers. Mira led the way, a torch in her hand, her boots ankle-deep in water. The stench. Rats. The ceiling was so low that Audrey had to duck. Kai followed behind Mira. Behind him was Lariah. Lena brought up the rear. Hannah stayed behind with the children. Kai insisted. Hannah argued. She cried. She said she couldn't just sit and wait. Kai said that 23 children couldn't be left alone. If they didn't return, Hannah would be the only one to take care of the children. Hannah fell silent. She hugged him, tightly, briefly. She let go, turned away. The sewer led to a crypt beneath the cathedral. Stone vaults, sarcophagi of ancient priests. Dust. Silence. Mira found a staircase leading up, narrow, spiral. It led to a side corridor on the first level. Lena took command, with gestures, quietly, professionally. 10 years in the Order hadn't been in vain. She knew every turn, every door, every blind spot. 2 guards at the side entrance to the main hall. Audrey took them both out, silently, the hilt of her sword to the temple. Both fell softly. Not dead, unconscious. Kai looked at Audrey. She nodded. The habit of not killing was still alive. They entered the main hall. Huge. The vaulted ceiling receded into the darkness. Columns on either side like a stone forest. And at the end of the hall, an altar. White stone, glowing from within. A man stood next to the altar. Tall, thin, wearing the archbishop's golden robe. White hair down to his shoulders. A narrow face, eyes so light they were almost transparent. Ortans. He stood before the altar and sang, quietly, monotonously. Words in a language Kai didn't know, but the panel did. The Ritual of Consecration. Phase 3 of 7. Incomplete. It can still be stopped. Standing next to Ortans was a man in a dark robe. A hood concealed his face, but Kai saw what others could not. The panel illuminated it. Inhuman energy. Demonic. Powerful. The emissary of the Demon King. Orthan's advisor. A partner in a deal that has lasted 3 centuries. Kai stepped out of the shadows. His footsteps echoed in the empty hall. Orthans did not stop singing, but his eyes opened. Bright. Empty. They saw Kai. He wasn't surprised. He had been waiting. Maybe not today, maybe not like this, but he had been waiting. Ortans stopped singing. Silence fell over the hall like a stone into water. He spoke. His voice was quiet, soft. The voice of a man accustomed to being heard, not because he shouts, but because an army stands behind his whisper. He said the boy had come, the guardian behind him, a former hunter, a former knight, a girl from the sewers. He named each one. He knew. He said he knew about the system, knew about moral currency, knew because he'd used it himself. Long ago, when he was young, when he believed that kindness had a price. Then he realized kindness isn't currency. Currency is fear. Fear works more reliably. Fear doesn't depend on intentions. Fear doesn't go into the red when you're thinking about the wrong things. He built everything the boy sees around him on fear. The guild, the order, the church, the kingdom, the world. Kai listened. He stood 20 paces from the altar, his arm in a splint. His body was exhausted. Opposing him were the regent archbishop, with 3 centuries of power behind him, and a demonic emissary whose strength Kai could not even begin to gauge. Ortans raised his hand, the seal of silence, his personal ability. The air thickened. Kai opened his mouth but could not utter a single sound. Silence. Absolute silence. Any truth turned into a whisper that no one would hear. The seal pressed down. It squeezed his throat. It muffled his voice. Kai couldn't speak. He couldn't activate the voice of the tablet. He couldn't say the names. Orton smiled, subtly. He turned back toward the altar. He continued the ritual. Phase 4. The emissary in the dark cloak threw back his hood. The face of a young man, handsome, cold, violet eyes, just like Laria's. He looked at her. He said 2 words. "Little sister, father misses you." Laria froze. Her brother, the Demon King's emissary. Kai stood in the silence of the seal of silence and could not speak. Ortans sang. The ritual continued. Phase 5. The stained glass windows above the altar began to glow. White, bright, blinding. The world was changing, right now. The connection to the dark market was being severed thread by thread. Kai closed his eyes. The voice of the tablet, S rank. To utter the names of the witnesses and activate their faith. But the seal of silence was drowning out the voice. He couldn't speak. He couldn't. He thought, quickly, feverishly. The moral currency system, double-entry bookkeeping, 2 columns, what they saw, what actually happened. Rewards are based on the second one. The voice of the scroll. He must say the names. Say them, not speak them. Say them. The panel flashed. A hint. The tablet records intentions, not words. Kai opened his eyes. He looked at Lariah, at Audrey, at Mira, at Lena. He couldn't speak, but he could think. And the system didn't read his voice. It read his heart. Kai clenched the fist of his good hand. He closed his eyes and began to say the names, silently, in his head, each name like a bell tolling inside his skull. Lariah Vern Cassidier, the one who brews cold tea with trembling hands, the one who teaches children to count with sticks, the one who waited 200 years for a single question. What's your name? Audrey Valente, the one who drinks bad tea to the last drop, the one who hits and teaches you to get back up, the one whose squad of 40 lives on in every name. Mira Sawyer, the one who doesn't believe but comes every evening, the one who steals from those who have nothing to steal, the one who says, "Feed the fool," and blushes. Hannah Chong, the one whose hands heal, the one who left the embassy and stayed, the one who cries, pressing strangers' hands to her face. Lena Castor, the one who broke his arm and came back, the one who took off the locket, the one whose father wasn't a heretic. Toby, Toby's mother. 10 orphans from the market, 22 children from the basement. Merchant Dalton, the old woman with the porridge, the girl who senses the rain, the woman who spat in the Baron's face, the guard at the warehouse whose mother is sick. Every name, every face, everyone he met, everyone he fed, everyone he protected, whom he called by name. The panel burst into light, golden, not dim, dazzling. The voice of the tablet was activated. Silence mode. Names spoken from the heart. The seal of silence does not block intentions. The witnesses were awakened. The cathedral's stained glass windows cracked, all at once. Not the white light of consecration, golden, warm, alive. Hundreds of names, inscribed on the glass by an invisible hand. The names of everyone Kai had helped, everyone he had called by name, everyone who had believed. Light filled the hall. Ortons interrupted the ritual. He turned around. His face was pale. His eyes were wide. He could feel it. The system was waking up. The dark market, 300 years of slumber, and now it was opening like a sealed coffin. Ortons screamed. For the first time in decades, he raised his voice. He ordered the emissary to stop. The emissary stepped toward Kai. Power surged from him in a wave. Demonic, heavy, black. Lariah stepped between them. Small, weak, having given up part of her power, but standing her ground. She looked at her brother. Said she'd send her regards to their father. In person. When the time came, Audrey drew her sword, stood beside Lariah. Lena drew hers. She stood on the other side, behind the column, a knife in her hand, eyes ablaze. The panel flashed. Resonance with Lariah Vern Cassidier. 100. Witness. Resonance with Audrey Valente. 100. Witness. Kai felt it, like a wave of warmth. Not power, warmth. Their faith. Their choice, their decision to stand, not because he asked, because they decided, on their own. The voice of the tablet grew louder. Golden light poured through the stained glass windows into the altar. The white stone cracked. Something rose from within, ancient, colossal. A tablet, not his small, personal tablet, the real one, huge. The dark market tablet, open, visible to all, to every person in the city. For a moment, every resident of Mervale saw a golden scroll before their eyes. Skills, abilities, prices, not in gold, in deeds. The system had returned. The seal of consecration had burst. The ritual was broken. Orton stared at the ruined altar, at the cracked stained glass windows, at the golden light flooding the cathedral. His seal of silence was melting away. His power was crumbling. He reached for the tablet. He tried to seize it, to subjugate it, just as he had long ago. When he was young and traded in the market, the panel flashed red. Rejection. The system won't accept it. Motivation verified. Thirst for power, control, fear, not accepted. Ortans recoiled. His face. Kai remembered that face. The face of a man who realized all was lost. Not anger, not rage. Emptiness. Ortans turned to the emissary. He said the deal had been broken. The emissary looked at him, coldly. Violet eyes. He said the deal had been broken, not by Kai, by Ortans. Ortans had promised to destroy the system. He couldn't, which meant Ortans was no longer needed. The emissary raised his hand, demonic energy condensed into a single point. Ortans didn't even have time to scream. His body went limp. It fell onto the stone floor in front of the ruined altar, silently, like a sack of bones. 3 centuries of power, 3 purge campaigns, thousands of deaths, and now he lay on the floor of his own cathedral, killed by his own ally. The emissary turned to Lariah. He said that their father was waiting, that the system must belong to the family, that it was time for her to go home. Lariah stood still. She looked at her brother. Then she turned her head toward Kai. She looked at him. For a long time, her violet eyes met his. She said she was home. The emissary didn't understand, or perhaps he understood but refused to accept it. He stepped forward. Kai stepped toward him, between Lariah and her brother, just like back then, at the market, between the guard and the cage. A skinny boy, his arm in a splint, without a sword, no armor, no army, with a system that only works if he doesn't cheat. The emissary looked at him, said the boy was ridiculous, brave but ridiculous. Kai looked him in the eyes. The blade of reflected pain, A rank. The witness's gaze, D rank. 2 witnesses behind him, Lariah and Audrey. Their faith, physical strength. He didn't attack. He didn't defend himself. He just stood there. The emissary struck. A wave of demonic power, heavy, brutal. It passed through Kai. The blade of reflected pain. Every bit of damage was reflected back. 30 seconds of phantom pain. The emissary flinched, for the first time. Not from the force, from the surprise. His own attack had struck him from within. Lena moved, quickly, like lightning. Her sword, the blade that had been cutting down heretics for 10 years, now it had found its true target. The emissary retreated. He blocked, but Lena wasn't the first blade for nothing. Audrey came in from the right. Mira threw a knife, right on target, into the gap between the plates of the demonic armor. The emissary growled. He retreated further. He looked at Lariah, at Kay, at the 4 women standing like a wall. He said this wasn't the end. He said his father would come himself. He vanished, dissolved into black smoke. Silence. The cathedral. Shattered stained glass windows bearing golden names. A destroyed altar. The dead Ortons on the floor. And golden light. Warm. Alive. The tablet of the dark market. Open. To all. Forever.